Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session. Before we begin, there's a couple of community guidelines. So participation via video and audio, is optional. But, if you want to say hello and wave and show your face, you certainly are welcome to. If you have a question, you can, I think that we'll take questions at the end. So if you'd like towards the end of the session to raise your hand, you could do that. Or you can put questions in the chat and I can share them out to the presenters for you. I will be monitoring the chat as well. Please be mindful that this session is being recorded, and don't forget to log into mProfessor after the session to make sure that you get your credit for attending. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Silvana, Kristin, Ciarán, Sonja, and Tram to start our presentation.
Thank you so much. And it's wonderful to share the space with everybody today. We want to talk to you about our NSF STEM Equity Grant, which is titled Fostering an Equity-Minded Student Success Culture in STEM through Faculty Development. So we want to give you, first of all, a little bit of background to our grant, as well as the impetus for why we applied for this particular grant. We want to talk about some of the work we've been doing on the grant, as well as some of the future directions that we want to take. Brian, I love Brian so much. Brian Rodas was injecting some positivity into the earlier session. And I think something to be celebrated in 2021 is the 10th anniversary of the Science Research Initiative, the STEM Scholars Program. It was codified in 2011 under HSI Title III grant. And it's a pipeline initiative in collaboration with UCLA. And I say it should be celebrated because we've seen various successes in terms of what our students have gone on to do. We have students who are in grad school right now. We have students who are working for NASA. We have students out there changing the world directly as a result of this program. Some of the major successes include an increase in enrollment and persistence for Black and Latinx students in STEM. We've also created a really robust student support services and practices. These include STEM Skills Week, STEM-specific counseling, peer mentorship programs, the STEM Lab, the supplemental instructors, as well as the Summer Scholars Research Program. Yesterday, Dr. Jeffrey reminded us of the James Baldwin quote that nothing can be changed until it is faced. And that's true of our work in STEM as well, because while we have many successes to celebrate, we fail our students in other respects. For instance, we see lower than expected graduation and transfer rates for our Black and Latinx students, as well as low GPAs, and less than 1 and 2 are passing in their math classes. Our grant has the term equity minded in it, and it really drives our work. And our work in definition of equity, and it mirrors that of the college. Yesterday, Dr. Munoz talked about how equity is embedded into the fabric of what we do at SMC, into our mission statement, into our SMC vision. And for us, equity means fair outcomes, treatments, and opportunities for all students. Equity means giving each student access to the resources they need to learn, thrive, and be successful. I want to bring your attention to this image. It's one I particularly love. It's from the Center for Urban Education. Yesterday, our keynote speaker, Dr. Frank Harris III, emphasized the fact that equity is multi-pronged. And there's many components to equity. And as we started to think about our work on our grant, there were many things we needed to consider. First of all, to inquire and understand how practices impede equity on our campus. a big component and something we'll talk about today is faculty training and professional development. Also, we needed to put a plan in place. And I'm reminded of the words of civil rights activist Shaun King, who says for a plan to work, you need a plan as complicated as the problem you're trying to solve. And that's something that we try and think about a lot. Finally, if you look at the top of this ladder, we see that a very important component of our work is data disaggregation. So before I started on this grant, I trained as a data equity coach under Hannah Lawler and the team at Institutional Research. And in order to start to work in equity, we have to understand our data. So here's our student success data courtesy of Institutional Research. And we have different color bars. We have our green representing our Asian students. Our blue bar is 2 or more races. The orange bar is white students, and the red and magenta are our Black and Latinx students respectively. Student success here can be measured in a variety of ways, but here specifically we're looking at students in STEM classes who received an A, B, C, or passing grade. 2 things I want you to notice. First of all, this is data over the course of 6 years, and we can see that very little has changed over that time. The patterns look the same from 2015 through to fall 2020. The second thing I want you to notice and pay attention to is that for our Black and Latinx students, they're not even succeeding in our classes at a 50% rate. So figuratively and literally, we're failing our students. If we move on to the next slide, this is looking at the same data, but here we're looking at the racial equity gaps. And once again, we see major gaps between our Asian, white students and our Black and Latinx students. And the size of those gaps is anywhere from 20 to 30%. And this is why we felt that this grant and this work that we're doing was both timely and urgent. So as we started to think about what was missing in terms of the SRI STEM Scholars Program, well, one of the keys is faculty, STEM faculty, because we know that we as faculty interface more than anybody else on our campus with our students. And we have a big influence over our students' success. There's a robust body of literature and research out there that supports this. One landmark study by John Hattie looked at over 50,000 research studies. And you're reading that correctly, a meta-analysis of over 50,000 research studies, which encompass the experiences of tens of millions of students. And this particular study found that overwhelmingly teacher is the factor which is the #1 determinant of student success. Our keynote speaker yesterday, Dr. Frank Harris III, along with his longtime collaborator, Dr. J. Luke Wood, carried out a study on thousands of community college students around the country and found that faculty ethos, and faculty ethos relates back to a lot of the things that our earlier presenter, Dr. Laura Rendon, was speaking about, things like creating a welcoming environment in the classroom, creating a sense of belonging, culturally relevant pedagogy, smiling to our students, welcoming our students into our classroom spaces, that this was a much larger predictor by a factor of 3 compared to the student's background. And students' background here are factors like high school GPA, their current GPA, their parents' educational status, their family income. So faculty ethos was threefold more important to student success and more predictive of student success than any of these student background factors.
So the big goal we have, of course, is to try to create a campus-wide equity-focused culture. But this grant, just as Ciarán just said, faculty plays such a major role, we're focusing on recruiting early career full-time STEM professors to train them to be equity practitioners within the discipline. We're going to do this by helping them develop practices that lead to successful. Sorry, I just saw the messages. Yay, thanks, Kevin. Sorry, we're gonna, let me start over again. Okay, so we're gonna train them to become equity practitioners within their discipline by exposing them and helping them develop the practices to lead them into, to successful outcomes for our underrepresented students, and specifically our Black and Latinx students. Marcus saying go Tram too. Thank you. You know, we've been teaching online so much. I'm so trained to keep an eye on the chat now that every time I see my name pop up, I just assume it's a question for me. So thank you for all of the support. Okay, next slide. I'll try again on the next slide. Thanks. So what we're doing is we're recruiting and selecting a number of faculty to be coaches and participants to undergo professional development. During this time, the participants are going to be exposed to a lot of different high impact and research-based equity-focused teaching practices. And with the help of the coaches, they're going to develop these practices to meet the classes of their specific classes and disciplines. Once they've had a chance to apply these new practices into their classes for at least a semester, we'll measure the impact of these projects through various student outcomes and surveys. And we'll go into a little bit further detail with it on the next slide.
Right. So for our first cohort, we identified 6 STEM faculty to serve as coaches. And they were identified through the work that they've previously done with equity initiatives at SMC. And what they do is provide a mentor role to the participants of the grant. So they help the participants with implementing equity practices and also answering any questions that the participants may have about equity and equity mindedness. For our participant side, we identified 12 STEM faculty, and we focused for the first cohort on the faculty who were most recently tenured or our probationary faculty. And they are with us for 2 years. So for the first year, they're developing their practices, they're learning more about equity mindedness through the core course for teaching men of color and various other presentations that we've been providing them with. And in year 2, they will be implementing the practices and will be measuring the impact that those practices have on their students. So for the coaches and participants, we tried to get everybody that we could from the earth sciences, life science, mathematics, and physical sciences departments. So I don't want to read everybody's names for the sake of time, but I would love to read everyone's names, just see everyone a shout out. But here you can see the wide variety of people we have participating.
So our grant outcomes are that we're going to work with our institutional research department as well as an external evaluator using quantitative and qualitative methods to measure the success of professional development activities. Then we're going to foster and strengthen equity-minded student success culture across the STEM disciplines. develop culturally responsive strategies to increase success, a sense of belonging and community for Black and Latinx students, increase the number of students completing a STEM degree, transferring to a bachelor's program, or entering the workforce within STEM, and reducing the equity gaps in student success, as Ciarán highlighted, with Black and Latinx students. So our process is that with our year two kind of cohort, is that they're gonna go through the training. So that's really like the focus on building a framework and helping them learn what equity is and how they can instill it in their practice. Then as they're learning all this, they're going to develop their own practices and their own mindsets around equity that will then help them establish and implement these practices in fall 2021. And then from there, as we said, we're going to collect more data. Some of the professional developments that we did within the first year was that we had the coaches serve as mentors and practitioners in equities. So all the coaches have been identified as people who have a lot of equity values and have participated in a lot of equity initiatives around our campus. So they get to kind of lead this cohort of participants through this journey. And it's really good because they themselves have gone through that same journey. We hired consultants. One of the consultants was Cora with Dr. Frank Harris and Dr. Luke Woods. The other one is Allied Path, that is the company by Dr. Veronica Kiefer-Lewis. And we also, with the help of the STEM program and Vanan Yachnian, we implemented a STEM student panel that provided feedback. We're attending two conferences that are equity focused. One is AAC&U, the Diversity, Equity, and Student Success Conference, and the other one would be NCORE. We've done courses and we've offered the opportunity for more courses to our participants to help them develop. The Cora Teaching Men of Color, there's a course called Grading for Equity, and then we're also hoping to do the anti-racism course design with Cora as well. And then there's a lot of reflection. So as we go through all of these different conferences, talking to consultants, finishing the courses, both within our cohort and with our external evaluator, we're collecting the reflection. How successful were these? How helpful were these? Did we push the equity gap in a sense of that they gain more knowledge in equity, and really to establish like how much they've learned. And then the development process for participants. So they were immersed in a small cohort training. As you saw, we only have 12. The coaches, consultants, conference and reflections really allow them to learn and apply what they've learned and reflect on what they've learned. The examination of equity-minded pedagogical practices really helps them build that framework again to really get to the implementing process. And we've reviewed the practices that they were going to implement. That's what we're doing this semester through an equity lens. So how effective will those practices be? Are they high or low cost? How much? And we've been using various data to help us evaluate how those practices will be placed.
So for the year two, which is what Silvana was finishing up on, is the participants will identify equity practices, and these are practices that the coaches have been presenting for the last 2 weeks, and will also present later today to the participants. And then the participants will pick equity practices that they are comfortable implementing and start developing and changing their courses so that they're ready for fall 2021 to implement those practices. And we'll evaluate the impact on student success and faculty student satisfaction. And we're going to always be centering equity in this. And then later on, we'll disseminate our project results by presenting at conferences locally and nationally.
So we wanted to identify some high impact practices when it comes to equity, because there are many practices out there, but some are low impact and some can actually do unintended harm to students. So we wanted to comb through the literature and use practices that have a robust body of work and support and evidence behind them. So we consulted a lot of the research literature, including research by Dr. Frank Harris III, by Dr. J. Luke Wood, Dr. Cecilia Rios Aguilar, Jeff Shinsky, the work of Dr. Laura Rendon, who we've heard from earlier. And these practices we've categorized as policies, things like reevaluating our student participation, attendance, late assignments, grading policies, how they can impede student success in their classroom. Also looking at things like sense of belonging, which is something that both Dr. Rendon highlighted in her talk, as well as yesterday, something that Sherry Bradford talked about with the Sayobona, the Zulu greeting, meaning I see you, that students are seen in the classroom, that they feel like they're part of the classroom, that they belong in those spaces. Practices like scientist spotlight, using culturally relevant pedagogy have positively impacted student success. Making what we teach relevant to our students, highlighting the accomplishments of biracial, indigenous, people of color in our classroom. And very important here, and something that Dr. Harris has highlighted in his work, is to highlight accomplishments in areas or fields that are not widely acknowledged in broader society. So we're very used to highlighting the accomplishments of people of color, say in sports or in music. And there's broad acknowledgement, but we all too often don't highlight accomplishments in, say, academic fields. So that's something that we spend a lot of time talking about and focusing on. A few weeks ago, we had Dr. Cecilia Rios Aguilar talk to our campus, and she talked about the importance of disseminating and empowering our students to access career information in our classrooms. And so that's a part of the work that we're doing. Also, intrusive interventions, how to email students, how to have a warm, inviting, welcoming tone when you reach out to students. We have an expert here on GPS, Kristin Lui-Martinez, and we got to hear the great work of that team yesterday, and it's a great tool that we have on our campus, and it allows us to reach out to our students and to really integrate and embed them in the support services that exist on our campus. We talk a lot about warm handoffs, facilitating connections for students rather than just telling students where to go. We facilitate that by writing an email and saying, hey, this is a student in my class and they want information about this. Just being a bridge for our students. Things like authentic care are super important and really drives a lot of our work. Things like student services. I saw Tiffany Dowd in the chat earlier, and her, along with Shanta De Leon, as well as Silvana here, have done a lot of work with Direct Connect, which is an amazing service that allows us to connect our students with student services on our campus. And in recent years, we've been doing a much better job of connecting our students with basic needs, but it's something that we as faculty need to facilitate more and do more of.
So then in spring 2022, our plan is to bring our second cohort in, where we will be recruiting new STEM full-time faculty. The faculty will go through the equity training and development. The faculty will develop and implement equity practice, and then assessment and results will be collected. Our our hope is that we will be able to do about 3 to 4 cohorts by the end of the grant in order to really not only implement it within the faculty that go through our training, but infuse it into the SMC campus wide, because as we get more faculty they go through various equity trainings and implementing practices and viewing our results and collecting that data, we're going to be able to really infuse that into creating an equitable campus altogether, especially within STEM. We just wanted to give a shout out to Edna Shavari, Melanie Bocanegra, and Lori McQuay, who were the first ones who helped write this grant and really brought us in. President Dr. Jeffries, Vice President Jenny Merlick, and the Dean of Academic Affairs, Jason Beardsley, because they helped a lot with the programming. Human Resources and STEM chairs, who have been the ones who helped us identify the participants. Tim Nguyen and SMC Institutional Research, who really helped us collect all that data. The National Science Foundation, who will speak shortly, and helping us improve STEM education. The STEM faculty participants who have been wonderful throughout this whole process, PDC, and most importantly, our SMC students. And then just to give you some general grant info, our NSF award is 1928737, if you want to Google us. No, and then it's really focusing on an undergraduate STEM education under the Department of NSF. It's about a $2.5 million grant. It has a 5-year cycle, which ends in September 2024. The focus is on STEM faculty development, and it is focused on faculty that are either new or starting their tenure track. And again, our goal will be to have various cohorts of equity coaches and STEM participants that complete professional development, develop equity practice to lead equitable student success. And these practices that get presented institutionally, like we are today, regionally in various conferences, and nationally as well. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our program officer, Sonja. So take it away.
I always forget to unmute. Thank you so much. So I want to start by saying thank you, Silvana, Kristin, Ciarán, and Tram for inviting me to speak to you today. I'm honored to be here to share with you information, and great job on what you've been doing so far. Next slide. So as Silvana said, I work for the National Science Division, National Science Foundation Division of Human Resource Development under Improving Education, STEM Education, specifically the HSI program, which is a funding that you all receive to do your programming. Under the HRD programs, we have, in addition to the HSI, and I'll talk a little bit about these individually in the upcoming slides, but just to give you an overview of some of the programs that are under our division that might be of interest to you, and that you would, when the solicitations are out for awards, and you're more than eligible to apply to all these opportunities. Next slide. So the HSI program under Improving Undergraduate STEM Education is a Congress-mandated program. It is designed to build capacities at HSIs that typically do not receive high level of NSF grant funding, with the goal of enhancing the quality of undergraduate STEM education. So basically the NSF and Congress mandated that more support needs to go to HSIs to build capacity, to really focus on the serving piece of the HSI designation. So that was the gist, or the foundation for this specific grant funding. Next slide. As encouraged by Congress, as I said, also that it is focused on building organizational capacity building, and it should involve developing structures that foster students and or faculty growth while meeting students where they are. So your entire equity piece and your faculty development really does align with the goals of the HSI program. Structures may include sociocultural support and collaborative processes that promote effective learning environments, and inclusive, as well as mechanisms to support personal development and professional learning for students. So as indicated in your previous slides or your previous presentations, the whole thing about sense of belonging, making sure you have culturally relevant pedagogy, those are all activities that are aligned with the HSI program. Next slide, please. The HSI program has 2 goals and 3 main strategies: to enhance the quality of undergraduate STEM education and to increase the recruitment, retention, and graduation rates of students pursuing associate's or baccalaureate degrees in STEM fields at HSIs. The strategies include support building capacity, incentivize institutional and community transformation, and to promote fundamental research on engaged student learning about what it takes to diversify and increase participation in STEM. Next slide. This is obviously you have to be certified to be an HSI to be eligible. You can be a non-HSI, you just can't be the lead, but it's you have to have the HSI certification either through Department of Ed or I think self-certification sometimes is allowed. And also our focus is primarily undergraduate institutions. Next slide. The HSI program has 3 specific tracks. There's a track 1, which is a planning. Now, you all were funded under our previous solicitation, so this is a little newer. We have track 1, which is equivalent to maybe what you have now, which is a planning or pilot project. There's track 2, which is the implementation and evaluation project, and then there's track 3, which is focused on institutional transformation. Track 1 and track 2 can be collaboratives with other institutions, but track 3 is one institution, your own institution, and that's it. If you submitted an application under the previous solicitation, then you're not eligible for another track 1. You can either apply for track 2 or submit for a track 3. Next, and then our next solicitation due date is August 25th. Next slide. This is just more information on the tracks, and an institution can't have more than 2 active or a track 1 under the previous solicitation. Next slide. So I sped through the HSI grant because you guys did such a good job in your previous presentations to talk about it. So I want to give you a little bit more time with some of our other opportunities, and if you have a chance to ask questions, and give you a chance to ask questions. So the advanced program is something that you could, it's a great opportunity. It's a grant that's designed specifically on faculty development and increasing the diversity of faculty at any institution. We don't have a lot of HSIs apply to the advanced program, so we do encourage HSIs to apply, and the grant support the advanced grant supports grants that support, develop, and implement, evaluate systemic change and strategies to transform academic institutional policies. So this grant, it is a lot about capacity building as well and institutional transformation. Next slide. They have 3 different goals. The advanced program is based on systemic change and gender equity, fixing institutions and not individuals. So these are the 3 program goals: STEM institutions and organizations that are structured to be equitable, research-based inclusive practices used by STEM institutions and organizations, and to impact STEM culture and climate that supports a diverse STEM academic workforce. At the end, their long-term goal is to have a productive and successful diverse STEM academic workforce. Next slide. They do use an intersectional approach. So it is encouraged that when teams apply, that their PI teams are also discipline diverse, and that you do have a social scientist researcher on there that can speak effectively to the intersectionality lens. Next slide. There are 3 different grant types. Just like in the HSI, they have the Catalyst, which is almost like a track 1. It gives you a chance to do a self-assessment, investigate, maybe pilot potential strategies. There's institutional transformation, which you develop and then you study the innovative organizational change, and then adaptation. The next proposal dates, they're not here, but for the institutional transformation, they have a preliminary proposal, like it's more like a letter of interest due in April. Next slide. This one is exciting. I just came out of, prior to this meeting, I had a conversation with the program officer for the CREST centers. And I'm not sure who the 4-year, but there's 7 CREST centers in California. I don't know if you're, and pardon my lack of geography on California, but there's I think UC Merced has a CREST center, and Cal State LA has a CREST center. This program provides support to enhance research capabilities of minority serving institutions through establishment of centers that effectively integrate education and research. So they do have a focus on really increasing the number of the student impact, direct student service, as well as faculty research. And these could be disciplined, these centers could be disciplined oriented, whether you have a faculty from, let's say, civil engineering that are electrical, that focus on nanotechnology or sensors, they could create a CREST center around that. They also don't have enough HSIs apply for the CREST program. So I do encourage you to take a look at that. And they, if you can partner with another institution, that would, I think those take priority. But if you want more information, the next slide, I think that I can put you in contact with that program officer should you desire. The LSAMP is an alliance-based program. It's called the Lewis-Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. And this is one of the programs that actually provides direct student service. These alliances and community colleges, 2 years, 4 years, it can be a combination of R1s and community, it can be a combination of things. California does have several LSAMP alliances. I think there is an alliance in California that's strictly made up of 2-year institutions, which is neat. They don't have that too much, but there's also one that's, I think the Cal State has I think they have a statewide one. But in any case, this provides us funding, and the solicitation will be open later on during this year, at the end of the year, closer to the end of the year, for new alliances. And let me see if the next slide has the tracks. No, go back. I should have included the tracks. This also has different tracks. If you Google, if you put in LSAMP in the NSF, it'll come up. They have different tracks. They have some B2B, which is baccalaureate to baccalaureate. So these are partnerships, and they do focus on critical transition points in the undergraduate journey. But the main goal of LSAMP is to increase the number of underrepresented students that go into graduate school. So they do focus on critical transition points in your academic journey, whether it's from, they don't have pre-college, but if you want to do if the focus of your project is like these pre-summer type of boot camps, you can do that with recent high school student, but there is no money that allow for actually K-12 activities, but that transition point. So it can be K-12, like seniors, graduating seniors into their first year. It can be community college to bachelor's, and then bachelor's to the master's. So this will focus on really the critical transition points. They do, one of the goals that they look on, the priorities that they look at the solicitation level, is that you're broadening participation, that you're impacting broadening participation. Next slide. The Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering is individuals. So you can nominate a mentor that is, and they have the requirements in there, but anyone from in any AI institution of higher learning, they can apply or they can submit, or you can nominate someone to get this award. And then the application is there. They have the deadlines is there as well. Next slide. I also thought it would be nice to put some student opportunities that you can share with your students that are also supported by the NSF. The STEM grad student science.gov. I think they have information on fellowships, REUs, all kind of good stuff there that you can share with students. The NSF GRFP, for those students that you know have an intent on going to grad school, to the PhD, this is a very competitive program. But it does give students, even if they don't get the fellowship, they do have the experience of grant writing and putting together what a grant solicitation is. So I think even the exercise of that is awesome. If they can familiarize themselves with that process, by the time they are ready to apply, they would be well prepared. Pathways to Science also is another good one that's also got the NSF I guess support. That also has information on REUs and all kind of good information on fellowships and tips to go on to money for graduate school and so on and so forth. So I just thought I'd throw in a slide there for you to share with students as well. And I think that's it. And then that's my direct email. Should you want to ask me any questions directly, or you want me to make introductions to some of the other program officers in the programs I shared that I gave you information on today. And I know that 4:15 was my limit, so I try to speed through it to give you enough time to at least 5 minutes for questions.
So we can throw it open for questions for the last 5 minutes. Or maybe everybody's hungry.
And it is Friday.
It is Friday. That is very true. I see a raised hand, Roman.
Yeah, hi. Well, thank you for the presentations. It was great. And I'm really happy that you have this 5-year grant to increase the number of equity-minded faculty. What are your specific metrics? I don't know who would answer this question, but what are the specific metrics for success of the program after 5 years with respect to increased student enrollment, especially Black students, because I haven't seen any movement in that. There is very minimal movement in that sense for the last few years to increase Black students enrollment in the STEM field and other targets. I know it's the fund is to increase the equity-minded teachers or faculty members, but is there any metrics to see that effect on the number of students, especially the underrepresented students? What's the metrics that you're looking for?
Absolutely. So we're working with Tim Wynn, who's our external evaluator, as well as with institutional research on that. And one of the approaches that's encouraged by NSF is triangulation, where we look at both quantitative data as well as qualitative data. So in our approach, we're going to look at not only outcomes in terms of our faculty, but also kind of look at our students and look at student success from a number of different ways, because student success isn't just one single metric. There are multiple measures. One of the things that we're going to embed into this is student panels as well as student focus groups, where we can meet with the students and talk to them about their specific experiences within the STEM classes. So the idea is that if we collect the quantitative data, for instance, the metric data, and we look at the qualitative data, we can see how both intersect with one another, see how they align, and if they do align, and if they do, that's probably telling us something. And if they don't, then we need to investigate where the breakdown is.
Okay, thank you. So there is a data right now for you to build on to say, okay, let's see the increase in this because this must be happening. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so in the fall semester is where we're going to do a lot of our data capture, and it's the implementation phase of our project. So our STEM equity practitioners, our faculty members are going to be implementing various practices in their classroom. And so we're going to do some pre-analysis, we're going to do some post-analysis, and we're going to be working, well, we are already working very closely with Tim on our methodology and making sure that we're measuring information that's useful, that we can look at and we can use, and making sure that that data is actually measuring what we think it should be measuring.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And good luck to all of us, I guess. Good luck to you guys, the committee, but also
Thank
to
you.
everybody. Yes. Thank you.
So I think we have time maybe for one more question. We just want to be respectful of everybody's time. Well, it's 1:15, or I guess 4:15 on where Sonja is. So I think that's a good place for us to stop off, and we can hang out for a few minutes if anybody wants to chat about our grant or ask us any questions, but we want to respect everybody's time. So we really appreciate you all coming here today.
Thank you.